Welcome to conservatism. Whether you are new to it, on the fence, or have been in it for a long time, this topic of false black power is on the menu. Please pull up a seat, and I'd enjoy hearing your take on this rotting issue, so by all means, comment below. Welcome to Patriot Jewel, the voice
Let's be
of
clear about that.
conservative women.
Let's really be clear about that. So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit black people. No.
But my overarching objective, if we cannot make significant progress on racial equity, this country is doomed. It is doomed, not just because of African Americans, but because by 2040, this country is going to be minority white European. You hear me? This country is doomed.
Patriot Jewel, though we may have visual similarities to liberal losers, we are not like them. Patrick Moynihan's warnings about the effects of family structure on Black socioeconomic outcomes were dismissed by his detractors as victim-blaming bigotry. But rising rates of violent crime, welfare use, and other social problems among poor Blacks in subsequent decades would ultimately vindicate the future New York Senate. Gutman's criticism, however, was of a different and more fundamental nature. The Moynihan Report rooted this Black family disorganization in slavery and Jim Crow, experiences that supposedly had undermined the position of men in poor Black households and made matriarchal Black families the norm. It was by destroying the Negro family that white America broke the will of the Negro people, wrote Moynihan. This analysis essentially was a rehash of consensus scholarly thought at the time. Black sociologist E. Franklin Frazier, from whose writing Moynihan borrowed heavily, and had made very similar arguments decades earlier in his 1939 study, The Negro Family in the United States. W.E.B. Du Bois and Kenneth Stamp were other prominent scholars who also had blamed white racism for the demise of two-parent Black families. Nevertheless, Gutman argued that this popular thesis was deeply flawed, and his book set out to rebut it empirically. Our objective was simple, wrote Gutman, whose initial research was conducted by fellow historian Lawrence Glasgow. If enslavement caused the widespread development among Afro Americans of a fatherless, matrifocal family sufficiently strong to be transmitted from generation to generation, thereby affecting the beliefs and behavior of descendants of 18th century African slaves who lived in mid 20th century northern urban ghettos, such a condition should have been even more common amongst urban African Americans closer to the time of slavery. Yet, that's not what the evidence indicated. After reviewing Confederate plantation records, census forms in various cities and counties in the North and South, interviews with ex-slaves, and other material, Gutman and Glasgow determined the following. During slavery, its immediate aftermath, and on through the first quarter of the 20th century, the vast majority of Black children were raised in two-parent households. Black marriages were as long-lasting and stable as the marriages of economically comparable whites, and Black female-headed homes that did exist tended to be, like their white counterparts, comprised of older widows, not teenagers raising
False black
children
power.
alone.
Jason, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I want to get to the argument in false black power, but let's start with your conclusion. What is false black power and what is true black power?
False black power is political power, political clout. True black power is human capital, something that can't be taken away from an individual or a group. By human capital, I'm referring to, it's a term that economists use, but essentially it refers to culture, cultural traits, habits, behaviors, attitudes that allow a group to produce economic value in what they're doing. And that human capital, I argue, is much more important than having political capital when it comes to advancing a group socioeconomically.
All right. The argument in false black power, your point of departure goes back more than half a century to the Moynihan Report of 1965 written by then Assistant Secretary of Labor Daniel Patrick Moynihan, later became a longtime senator from New York. The formal title of the report, The Negro Family, The Case for National Action. Moynihan noted the rise among black families in inner cities of families headed by single women and wrote, the Negro family in urban ghettos is crumbling. Why did Moynihan believe that the families were crumbling? What was the cause he associated with that datum?
This had grown out of the black migration out of the South, which was very hard on families, frankly.
By the way, I just want to observe. Brief book, readable, and I picked it up thinking, here we have a polemic, we have an argument. It is that, but it is deeply concerned with history, with African American history. All right, so we have,
and it is because it's concerned with an aspect of black history that I don't think gets a lot of attention. People sort of think we went from slavery to Rosa Parks refusing to sit down on a bus or go to the back of a bus, and then the civil rights movement took us to where we are today. But I think we're missing a lot of material here, and that is the period in between the end of slavery and the beginning of the modern day civil rights movement and the advancement that was going on within the black community. Frankly, at a time when the federal government could care less what was going on. There was no Civil Rights Act. There was no Voting Rights Act yet. This was during Jim Crow. This is post-Reconstruction. And I think that this period of black history is underappreciated. What was going on at that time? How were blacks advancing or not advancing at that time period? And I think when we talk about what should be done today to help blacks,
right,
we should look at this period and study this period, what was going on. And that's what I try and do.
There are numerous studies on the progress made amongst Black Americans pre-civil rights and welfare state eras. What is clear is that the civil rights era and the initiation of the welfare state were pivotal, mind and life-altering events during which Black Americans were faced with two choices: one, independence and self-sufficiency, or two, dependence on or coercion of white American and the U.S. government to ideologically, socially, and politically accept Black America as equal and therefore financially control the lives of Black America's poorest. The second choice required integration and affirmative action, i.e., DEI, plus an addiction to replacing reliance on God and self with reliance on the government to sustain life. Said reliance inevitably turns to entitlement. There were plenty of those who desired choice number one. However, their voices were drowned out by the bullhorns of the communist regime that had already planted seeds and taken root in the Black intelligentsia, the Black church, and Black grassroots organizations. At this point, we have learned that even MLK was drenched in communist philosophy and teachings, but that huge nugget of truth is for another episode. Suffice it to say that in order for choice number two to take root and change history, politics had to be used as the force to affect and engage the government. Hence, the lie was sold that in order for Black Americans to advance, they had to jump the proverbial train tracks. The track of self-reliance and self-sufficiency through character hard work, reinforced by the stability of family units and stronger community, had to be relinquished for the track towards forced inclusion agendas and reliance on the power of government to make a better life for Black Americans. And so the dawning of a new age of professional race hustler peddling never-ending systemic racism and affirmative action / DEI arose. The Jesse Jacksons, the Black Panthers, the NAACP 2.0, the Al Sharptons, the Black Studies Ivy League professors, the Black crime ambulance chasing attorneys, the Congressional Black Caucus and its members, the Obamas, the Marxist directed BLM, and the new profession of DEI advocates of the 2020s. After chasing Black political power for 65 years, the results are dismal, with a loss in morality, firm positive values, family structure, decency, and the respect of fellow American citizens. Indeed, true power lies in human capital, as mentioned by the great minds such as Jason Riley and Thomas Sowell. Let's continue this conversation in the next episode. Please comment, like, and subscribe. Patriot Jewel, signing out. Patriot Jewel, though we may have visual similarities to liberal losers, we are not like them.
Young man, there's no need to feel down.